Delete it. Now. The voice on the phone was a serrated edge of panic, the chief technology officer of a $10 billion analytics firm reduced to a stammering mess. In her penthouse office, a glass cage suspended 50 stories above the sleeping city, Evelyn Reed was unmoved. Her world was data, and data did not panic. "I can't," she replied, her own voice a low, steady counterpoint. She stared at the wall-sized monitor before her. Where the meticulously crafted Q3 revenue projections should have been, there was only chaos. A roiling, kaleidoscopic storm of corrupted code, shifting and rewriting itself every second. It was less a glitch and more a digital seizure. The overwrite is active. The entire dataset is gone, replaced by this. Then pull the plug. Shut down the server farm. Her CTO, Ben, pleaded. And lose the core data for the entire quarter? Plunge us into the dark 2 days before the annual board meeting? That's not a solution, Ben. That's corporate suicide. She ran a hand through her severe, dark hair. For the first time in a long time, the cold logic that had propelled her to the top of this ruthless world was failing her. The data was fighting back. A soft knock at the doorframe of her office broke her concentration. She turned, irritation flaring. It was the night cleaner, the tall, quiet man who emptied her trash and wiped the fingerprints from the glass walls that encased her. He stood there, holding his cart, his gaze averted. He was a ghost in the machine of her building, a figure she saw but never registered. "I can come back," he said, his voice soft, almost apologetic. "Just be quick," Evelyn snapped, turning back to the crisis at hand. "Ben, listen to me. This isn't random. There's a structure to it. I need you to find the ingress point. Now." She hung up, the silence of the vast office pressing in. The only sound was the gentle squeak of the cleaner's cart and the whisper of his cloth against the glass. She felt his presence as an intrusion, a low-status distraction in a high-stakes moment. He paused behind her. She could feel his stillness. "Sorry to interrupt, ma'am," he began, his voice hesitant. "But that's not a glitch." Evelyn turned slowly, an eyebrow arched in disbelief. The janitor was looking past her, his eyes fixed on the chaotic data storm on her screen. There was a focus in his gaze she'd never seen before, a deep, analytical calm that was utterly at odds with his rumpled gray uniform. "Excuse me? It's not a glitch," he repeated, taking a half-step closer. His eyes, dark and intelligent, scanned the cascading code. "It's a message." The sheer audacity of the statement left her speechless for a second. "And what would you know about quantum encryption algorithms?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. He didn't seem to notice. He pointed a long, steady finger at the screen. "There, the hexadecimal strings. You see the blocks repeating? 7, 14, 21. And the offset in the checksum value is always a prime number. It's not random noise. It's deliberate. It's a signature." Evelyn stared, first at him, then at the screen. Her mind, a finely tuned instrument for pattern recognition, followed his direction. He was right. Amidst the chaos, there was a subtle, repeating architecture, a logic hidden beneath the madness. Her world-class cybersecurity team had seen only a fire. This man, this janitor, saw the arsonist's handwriting in the flames. The blood drained from her face. The crisis of the corrupted data was suddenly eclipsed by a far more profound mystery. She looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. He was tall and lean, with a weariness around his eyes that spoke of long nights and deeper sorrows. He seemed to shrink back under her scrutiny, his shoulders hunching as if to reassume his cloak of invisibility. Earlier that evening, she'd seen him from the tinted window of her town car, a fleeting moment she'd almost forgotten. He'd been at the 24-hour pharmacy on Elm, standing under the harsh fluorescent lights. He was trying to return a small box, an inhaler, she realized now. The pharmacist was shaking his head, gesturing to a sign. The man's shoulders had slumped in a way that was so profoundly defeated it had registered even to her. A brief, uncomfortable flicker of shared humanity before her driver had pulled away. Now, that same man stood in her office, deconstructing a multi-million-dollar cyber attack with the ease of a master craftsman. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions. "Who are you?" Evelyn Reed asked, her voice barely a whisper. Fear. Cold and sharp, it sliced through Marcus Thorne. He had said too much. He had broken the first and most important rule. Stay invisible. For 5 years, invisibility had been his shield, his sanctuary, the bedrock of the quiet, anonymous life he had built from the ashes of another. Being a ghost was how he kept his daughter safe. I used to do some computer work. A long time ago," he stammered, taking a step back towards his cart, his hands gripping the handle like a life raft. "It's probably nothing. I should go." He needed to get home. He needed to check on Maya. Her soft wheezing in her sleep was a constant low-level hum of anxiety in his life. The new prescription, the one the pharmacy wouldn't let him return even though he'd chosen it over refilling their refrigerator, sat uselessly on his dresser. The doctor had said this new one would be better, but the copay had been a brutal blow, and Maya had complained it made her feel jittery. He had failed. He couldn't even provide her with the right medicine. The shame of that moment at the pharmacy counter was still a hot coal in his gut. And now this. He had let the puzzle of the code draw him in. The old instincts, the ones he had buried so deep he'd thought them dead, had surfaced. He had seen the pattern on the screen and his mind, without his permission, had started to solve it. "Stay," Evelyn commanded. Her voice had lost its dismissive edge, replaced by a steely authority that tolerated no argument. She gestured to the plush leather chair opposite her desk, a piece of furniture that cost more than his car. "Sit." He remained standing. "Ma'am, my shift is almost over. I have to get home to my daughter." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. She picked up her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen with silent, predatory speed. The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus could hear his own heart beating a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He was trapped in the apex of the pyramid, a place of glass and light and power he had spent half a decade avoiding. This building, Ethelred Analytics, was just a job, a place to be faceless, to earn a steady, unremarkable paycheck that kept a roof over Maya's head. "Marcus Thorne," she said, not looking up from the tablet. "Age 38, resident of apartment 4B, 212 East Paxton Street. Widower. You have one child, Maya, age 7. She attends Northwood Elementary. You've been employed by Citywide Cleaning Services for 4 years and 8 months. Before that," she paused, swiping again. "Before that, your record is sealed." "Military?" He flinched. She had dissected his life in 90 seconds. "That's none of your business. When you speak about my company's encrypted data, you make it my business," she countered, finally looking up. Her eyes were like chips of ice. "My head of cybersecurity, who earns $900,000 a year, tells me he's looking at a digital apocalypse. You, who empties his trash can, tell me it's a message. I'm inclined to believe you." She stood and walked to a small, glass-walled conference room that adjoined her office. It was empty save for a table, 2 chairs, and a single, high-powered terminal. That terminal is a direct, closed-loop link to the compromised server. No outside connection. No digital footprint. My team says it will take them a week to build a decryption key. The board meeting, where I will either be confirmed for another term or ousted, is in 47 hours. She turned to face him fully. The power dynamic was absolute. She was the queen in her castle, and he was a peasant pulled from the fields. "I'm offering you a test, Mr. Thorne. Decipher the message. Find out what it says and who sent it. Do it before the meeting." "I'm a janitor," he said, the words tasting like ash. It was his shield, his mantra. "I don't care if you're a brain surgeon," she shot back. "You saw something they couldn't. I don't trust people, Mr. Thorne. I trust results. People lie. Data doesn't." She paused, her gaze intense. "I will pay you $50,000. $50,000. The number hung in the air, shimmering, obscene. It was more than he made in a year. It was new inhalers. It was a refrigerator full of fresh food. It was a small, two-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood. It was a future for Maya free from the constant, grinding worry of poverty. But it was also a door back to a world that had taken everything from him. A world of secrets and lies, where information was a weapon and brilliant minds were targets. He thought of Maya's trusting face, of the drawing she had given him before he left for work. A wobbly, crayon-drawn lion with a magnificent mane. "For you, Daddy," she'd said. "Because you're brave." Was he brave? Or was he a coward, hiding in the shadows? "The money doesn't matter," Marcus said, his voice finding a new firmness. He was no longer the apologetic cleaner. He was a father with a choice to make. "I need to be home by 6 a.m. to get my daughter ready for school. No exceptions. And my involvement ends when this is done. No contracts, no records. I was never here." A flicker of something, surprise, respect, crossed Evelyn's face. Agreed. She led him into the glass room and left, closing the door behind her. He was alone with the machine. On the screen, the data storm still raged. Marcus sat down. He flexed his fingers, a strange, forgotten muscle memory returning. He took a deep breath, and for the first time in 5 years, he let the ghost out. He let Marcus Thorne, the forensic accountant, the man who could hear the whispers in the numbers, go to work. Evelyn watched him from her desk, a live feed of the conference room on her secondary monitor. He didn't type frantically. He didn't try to brute force his way in. He just watched. He observed the flow, the rhythm, the cadence of the chaos. He was like a naturalist watching a flock of birds, discerning the subtle rules that governed their flight. Hours passed. The sky outside the panoramic windows began to soften from inky black to a bruised purple. Evelyn had dozed off in her chair, a rare concession to exhaustion. A soft chime from her computer woke her. On the monitor, the feed from the conference room was different. Marcus was standing, stretching his back. And on the terminal screen in front of him, the storm was gone. In its place was a single, pristine file. A ledger. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. She strode to the conference room and opened the door. Marcus looked up, his eyes tired but clear. "The encryption wasn't a lock," he said, his voice raspy. "It was a question. The repeating blocks, the prime number offsets. It was asking for a specific date. A stock market crash from the 1980s. I just had to figure out which one inch." He had unlocked it. He hadn't broken the door down. He'd found the key that was hidden in plain sight. He gestured to the screen. "It's a ghost ledger, hidden inside the main server architecture. Someone is siphoning money. Small amounts from dozens of different departmental budgets. IT, marketing, R&D, all pennies on the dollar, routed through a series of shell accounts and then consolidated into one offshore entity in the Caymans." Evelyn stared at the columns of numbers. They were so small, so insignificant, that no automated audit would ever flag them. 1,000 here, 500 there. But added up, over the 6 months the ledger covered, it was millions. A slow, silent, methodical bleed. "It's brilliant," she breathed, a chill running down her spine. "And terrifying." Marcus nodded, gathering his jacket. The clock on the wall read 5:45 a.m. "My work is done." "No," Evelyn said, her mind racing. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. "Your work has just begun." Evelyn Reed did not do favors. She did not engage in sentiment. She operated on transactions, on the clear and ruthless calculus of value. The man standing before her, this janitor who moonlighted as a digital warlock, had just proven himself to be the most valuable asset she had encountered in years. $50,000 was no longer a payment. It was an insult. "I need you to find who did this," she said, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. She had already transferred the promised amount to a blind account, the details of which she'd written on a slip of paper. But this was about more than money now. This was about a violation. Someone had breached her fortress, not with a battering ram, but with a skeleton key, and was bleeding it dry from the inside. It was an act of profound betrayal. I told you I'm done, Marcus replied, his jaw set. The weariness in his eyes was warring with a stubborn resolve. I found the problem. That was the deal. The deal has changed, Evelyn stated, walking back to her main desk and gesturing for him to follow. The city was waking up below them, a river of headlights flowing through the concrete canyons. What you've uncovered isn't just theft. It's a systemic breach by someone with intimate knowledge of our financial architecture. Someone on the inside. This ledger is the what I need you to find the who name your price. She was prepared for him to ask for a fortune. She would have paid it. Marcus looked from her to the slip of paper she had placed on the desk, then back to her. He didn't even glance at the amount. I don't want a price. I don't want a contract, or a title, or my name on any piece of paper that connects me to this company. Evelyn frowned. Then what do you want? I want to remain a ghost, he said. I'll help you. From the shadows. You will provide me with access. All of it. Server logs, security protocols, personnel files. And you will provide a stipend for my time, paid the same way as this. He tapped the slip of paper. In cash to an account that cannot be traced back to me. And in return, I will find your thief. But my first priority always is my daughter. Her safety and well-being are non-negotiable. He met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw no fear in his eyes, only unshakable conviction. If this investigation puts her at risk in any way, I walk. Instantly. Are those terms acceptable? It was the strangest negotiation of her life. He was turning down millions, a formal position of power, for the one thing she had never been able to acquire for herself. Anonymity. He wanted to hold all the cards but remain out of the game. It was a brilliant, paradoxical strategy. It was also, she realized, the only way he could operate. His power came from his invisibility. Acceptable, she confirmed. A reluctant, transactional alliance was formed. She led him not to a new office, but down, deep into the building's core. They bypassed the sleek, modern floors of her executives and took a service elevator to the sub-basement. The air grew cooler, the polished marble giving way to bare concrete and exposed pipes. It was a world of humming machinery and stark, functional reality. In a locked, climate-controlled room that housed obsolete server racks, a single, isolated terminal had been set up, identical to the one in her conference room. "This will be your office," she said. The symbolism was not lost on her. He would work in the foundations of the building, in the dark, to protect the gleaming tower above. No one comes down here. The access logs for this room are wiped hourly. You'll have a direct line to me, and only me. Marcus nodded, running a hand over the cool metal of the terminal. He seemed more at home here, in the shadows, than he did in the light-drenched penthouse. I need full, unredacted access to all remote login data for the past year. VPN, direct terminal access, everything. And I need the physical security logs for the executive floors. Keycard swipes, elevator logs, the works. You'll have it, Evelyn promised. As Marcus began his descent into the data, Evelyn ascended back to her own world, a world of performative confidence and veiled threats. Her first meeting was with the senior leadership team. Julian Croft, a board member and the head of strategic acquisitions, was the first to speak. He was handsome, silver-haired, with a charm that could disarm a firing squad. He had been a rival for the CEO position, a loss he had accepted with a public grace that Evelyn had never trusted. "Evelyn, my dear," he began, his voice a smooth baritone. "Ben has been telling us about the hiccup last night. A serious one, it seems. Are you sure our internal team is equipped to handle this? A breach of this magnitude might require a more robust response." "Our internal team is more than equipped, Julian," Evelyn replied, her voice cool. She watched him carefully. He was projecting concern, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "The issue has been contained." "Contained," Julian pressed, a skeptical smile playing on his lips. "My sources say the entire Q3 projection was compromised. With the board meeting in 2 days, that could be catastrophic. It suggests a lack of control." The words hung in the air. A lack of control. It was a direct challenge to her authority. "The data is secure," Evelyn said, her gaze sweeping over the other executives in the room. "And the situation is being managed. That is all you need to know." She felt a vibration from the burner phone she'd given Marcus. A single, encrypted message. She glanced at it under the table. "Found something. The transactions aren't automated. They're manual. Always the third Tuesday of the month. Always between 2 o'clock and 2:03 a.m. A 3-minute window." Evelyn's blood ran cold. Manual. That meant the thief had to be physically at a keyboard, executing the command. It wasn't a passive algorithm. It was an active human thief. She looked up at the faces around the boardroom table. One of them was a liar. One of them was a traitor. Julian Croft smiled his reassuring smile. "Of course, Evelyn. We have complete faith in you." Marcus Thorne was a man divided. By day, he was simply Dad. He walked Maya to the little park near their apartment, pushing her on the swings until she shrieked with laughter, her face tilted towards the sun. He sat with her at their small kitchen table, their heads bent together over sheets of paper, her small hand guiding his as she taught him how to draw a proper castle, complete with a dragon in the moat. Her drawings, vibrant and full of innocent conviction, were taped all over their small apartment. They were pictures of knights and queens, of smiling lions and happy families. They were talismans against the gray reality of their world. "This one is the king, Daddy," she would say, pointing to a figure with a lopsided crown. "He's sad because his queen is in the stars now. But he's strong. He protects the whole castle." Marcus would smile, a hollow ache in his chest. He was no king. He was a janitor, a man in hiding. He was protecting a castle of 2, and he feared, every day, that its walls were made of sand. Then, as the sun set, he would transform. He would kiss Maya goodnight, her breathing already taking on the soft, wheezing edge that was the soundtrack to his anxiety. He would wait until her breaths were deep and even, then slip out into the night. The janitor's uniform was his costume, his disguise. It allowed him to move through the world unseen, his head down, his presence ignored. But once he was in the sub-basement of Ethelred Analytics, in the cold, humming darkness, another man emerged. The hunter, the ghost. He swam in an ocean of data Evelyn had provided. A year's worth of digital breadcrumbs left by every employee in a 10,000-person company. It was a blizzard of information designed to overwhelm. But for Marcus, it was a story. He wasn't looking for a single clue. He was looking for a narrative. He was looking for the human being hiding in the machine. He cross-referenced the transaction window, that tight, 3-minute gap on the third Tuesday of every month, with the remote access logs. The thief was smart. They used a masked VPN, bouncing their signal through a dozen internal servers to appear as if they were coming from inside the building's own network. It was a digital ghost. But ghosts leave traces. Marcus ignored the final login point. He worked backward. He traced the handshake protocols, the digital greetings each server made to the next. He found a flaw. Between the third and fourth bounce, for a single fleeting nanosecond, the original IP address was unmasked before it was cloaked again. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible flaw in an otherwise perfect piece of code. His heart began to pound. He isolated the address. It wasn't a random string of numbers. It was a static IP, assigned to a single account. An executive-level VPN account. The thief wasn't just an insider. They were in the inner sanctum. A board member, or a C-suite executive. One of the handful of people who held the keys to Evelyn Reed's kingdom. He sent the encrypted data point to Evelyn. He knew what it meant. The circle of trust she had built around herself was a fiction. The enemy was already inside the gates. He leaned back, the chill of the room seeping into his bones. The thrill of the hunt was there, a familiar, addictive burn. But so was the fear. This was how it had started with Sarah, his wife. A small thread, a minor discrepancy in a corporate report. She had pulled on it, and her investigation had unraveled a conspiracy that went all the way to the top. They had warned her, first with threats, then with sabotage. She hadn't stopped. And then had come the rainy night, the winding road, the truck that had lost its brakes. The police had called it a tragic accident. Marcus knew it was an execution. He, the man who could find any secret in the numbers, had been left with a truth he could never prove. He had taken their daughter, Maya, and disappeared. He had erased Marcus Thorne, the brilliant forensic accountant who had worked alongside his journalist wife, and created Marcus the janitor, a man with no past and no ambition, a man no one would ever look at twice. Until now, he was pulling on a thread again, and he knew, with a certainty that terrified him, that something venomous was on the other end. Upstairs, in the sterile perfection of her office, Evelyn stared at the data Marcus had sent her. The list of people with that level of VPN access was terrifyingly small. 12 names. 12 pillars of her company. Her mentors, her rivals, her allies. Julian Croft's name was third on the list. Her instinct, the one she had trained herself to ignore in favor of hard data, screamed his name. The way he had challenged her in the meeting, his feigned concern, his suggestion to control the narrative, it all clicked into place. But instinct wasn't proof. The burner phone vibrated again. A new message from Marcus. He knows we're looking. The VPN flaw I found? It's gone. The logs from last night have been scrubbed. He's covering his tracks. The thief was watching them. The hunter was also the hunted. A knock on her door made her jump. It was Julian Croft. He stepped inside, that same easy, confident smile on his face. He held 2 glasses of whiskey. "You look like you could use this," he said, his voice smooth as the aged liquor. "Tough day." "I'm fine, Julian," she said, her voice tight. "Are you?" He set the glasses down, his eyes scanning her desk, lingering for a fraction of a second on the burner phone. "I heard you've hired some sort of consultant. A ghost, they're calling him. Sweeping the dark corners of the company. It's a bold move, Evelyn. But a risky one. Sometimes, when you turn over rocks, you find things you don't want to see. Things that can't be put back." It wasn't a warning. It was a threat, wrapped in silk. "Thank you for the advice, Julian," Evelyn said, her voice ice. "But I have it under control." He picked up his glass, raising it in a mock toast. "I hope so." For the company's sake, he took a sip, his eyes meeting hers over the rim of the glass. "And for yours." When he left, Evelyn's hand was shaking. The alliance she'd formed with her janitor was no longer just about business. Felt like a battle for survival. She looked at the list of 12 names, then back at the dark screen of the burner phone. In a world of lies, the quiet man in her basement was the only truth she had left. The threat had changed the dynamic. Evelyn found herself watching the security feed from the sub-basement not with the detachment of a supervisor, but with a growing, unfamiliar sense of protectiveness. She saw Marcus, head bowed over the terminal, a solitary figure waging a silent war on her behalf. She saw the quiet dedication, the relentless focus. He wasn't like the men in her boardroom, with their political maneuvering and fragile egos. He was a craftsman, pure and simple. His work was his only credential, and it was impeccable. His invisibility, she realized, was both his greatest weapon and his most profound vulnerability. He had no corporate armor, no legal team, no golden parachute. He had only his daughter and the shadows he chose to live in. "He's getting closer," she said into the encrypted comms line that connected her penthouse to his subterranean world. "Julian was just here. He knows we're hunting him." "I know." Marcus's voice came back, calm and steady. "He's not just covering his tracks. He's building a wall. I can't get back to that IP address. The pathway is sealed. But he's arrogant. He'll make a mistake." "We can't wait for a mistake," Evelyn said, her mind racing. "The next transaction window is tomorrow night. We have to force his hand. We need to set a trap." A plan formed between them, a dangerous piece of digital brinkmanship. Marcus proposed a honeypot. They would create a new, fictitious project budget, a ghost account within the system. They would fund it with a sum of money large enough to be tempting, an irresistible lure. But this bait would be poisoned. The funds will be tagged, Marcus explained, his voice low and intense. Not with a standard tracker, he'd spot that in a second. I'll embed a shard of code into the currency's digital signature itself. Parasitic string. When he moves the money, the shard will attach to his system, and it won't just track him. It will map his entire local network and send the blueprint back to me. It was audacious and brilliant. Evelyn felt a thrill of nervous energy. Can you do it? I can do it, he confirmed. But, Evelyn, if he detects it, he will know exactly where it came from. He will know it came from this terminal. For me, the risk was immense. They were dangling a piece of meat in front of a tiger, and Marcus was holding the string. Do it, she said, the decision made. Let's catch this son of a bitch. For the next 24 hours, Marcus worked without a break. He went home only for a few hours, to see Maya off to school with a hug that lasted a little too long. His face buried in her hair. He absorbed the scent of her shampoo, the feeling of her small arms around his neck, storing it away like a man preparing for a long winter. Then he returned to the cold and the dark and built his trap. The third Tuesday of the month arrived. Night fell. Evelyn sat in her office, the city lights a glittering tapestry below, but her entire universe was focused on two screens. One showed the honeypot account, a dormant figure of $5 million. The other showed a live feed of Marcus, watching his own terminal, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen, his expression a mask of intense concentration. The minutes ticked by. 1:55 a.m. 1:58 a.m. The silence was deafening. Then, at 2:01 a.m., it happened. The number on the screen flickered. The $5 million vanished. He took it. Evelyn breathed into the comms. I see it, Marcus replied, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The transfer is happening. The parasite is attached. It's working. It's mapping his local machine. I'm getting a network diagram. It's heavily encrypted, but I can break it. A wave of triumph washed over Evelyn. They had him. But the triumph lasted only a second. A piercing alarm suddenly blared from Marcus's terminal. Red warning lights flashed across his screen. What is it? Evelyn demanded, her heart leaping into her throat. He found it, Marcus said, his voice strained. Damn it, he's good. He had a sentry, a counter-protocol. It's purging the parasite. Can you stop it? No, it's more than a purge. It's a counterattack. It's sending a packet back through the connection, a logic bomb. It's trying to wipe this terminal. Marcus worked furiously, trying to erect a firewall, but it was too late. The attack was too fast, too vicious. It's in. It's not just wiping the drive. It's searching. It's scouring for data. A new, deeper dread filled Marcus. He had been so careful. But in his exhaustion, he'd made one small human error. A few days ago, he'd downloaded a file from his personal email to the secure terminal, meaning to print it. It was a PDF. Maya's new school registration form, complete with her name, her teacher's name, and the school's address. He had forgotten to delete it. The logic bomb found it in a nanosecond. It consumed the file, and then, its primary function complete, it executed the wipe. The screen went black. The terminal was dead. Marcus? Marcus, what happened? Evelyn's voice was frantic on the comms. Before he could answer, a chime sounded from her laptop. A new email. It was from an anonymous, encrypted address. The subject line contained only 3 words. Stay out of it. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. She opened the email. There was no text, just a single attachment. She clicked on it. An image loaded. It was a crisp, clear satellite view of a school playground. Northwood Elementary. In the center of the image, a group of children were playing near a set of swings. A single, crudely drawn red circle was around the entire area. The threat was no longer digital. It was no longer corporate. It had crossed the line into the real world. The antagonist hadn't just returned fire. He had taken a hostage. Marcus saw the image on the feed of Evelyn's screen. All the air left his body. The hum of the servers, the chill of the room, the distant city. It all faded away. All he could see was that red circle. All he could hear was the echo of a vow he had made to his dying wife. "I'll keep her safe, Sarah. I swear it." He had failed. The monster he had run from for 5 years had found him, and he had led it straight to his daughter. "I'm out," he said into the comms, his voice a choked, ragged thing. He stood up, knocking his chair over. He felt like he was suffocating. "I'm done. He wins. He can have the whole damn company. I can't lose her." He ripped the comms piece from his ear and threw it against the wall. He was halfway to the door, a blind panic driving him, when Evelyn's voice boomed from a speaker on the wall. "Marcus, stop." He froze, his hand on the door handle. "Listen to me." Her voice was sharp, commanding, but underneath it was a tremor he had never heard before. "You can't run. Don't you see? This isn't a threat against her. Not really. It's a threat against you. It's a leash. He's telling you that he owns you now, that he can pull on that leash whenever he wants. If you run, you're telling him it works. You will spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. You and Maya will never, ever be safe." He leaned his forehead against the cold steel of the door, his body trembling. She was right. He knew she was right. Running was what the old Marcus would have done. "We don't run," Evelyn's voice continued, softer now, but fiercer. "We hunt. We find him, we expose him, and we destroy him. Not for the company. For her." Together she paused. "I have a 4-man executive protection team on my personal payroll. As of right now, they have 1 client. Her name is Maya Thorne. They will be a ghost detail. They'll be on her school, on your apartment, everywhere she goes. They are the best in the world. I promise you, Marcus, no one will get near her." He turned back from the door, his panic slowly receding, replaced by something cold and hard and heavy, a rage unlike anything he had ever known. Someone had put his daughter's life on a chessboard. They had made it personal. Now he would finish it. "Okay, Evelyn," he said, his voice low and dangerous. No more rules. The penthouse became their war room. The move was Evelyn's idea, a strategic and symbolic shift. Marcus was no longer a ghost in the machine. He was a king in the castle, albeit a reluctant one. The contrast was jarring. Maya's crayon drawings, which Marcus had brought from home in a desperate need to have her close, were now taped to the vast, floor-to-ceiling glass walls. A vibrant, innocent lion with a lopsided crown now stared out over the glittering, indifferent cityscape. The symbol of innocence was plastered over the symbol of isolation and power. Marcus worked with a new, terrifying intensity. The fear for Maya had not vanished. It had transmuted into fuel. It was a cold, clean-burning rage that sharpened his focus to a razor's edge. Evelyn watched him, amazed. The weary, cautious man was gone, replaced by a predator. "The counterattack was his mistake," Marcus said, pacing before a new bank of monitors they had set up. "It was too sophisticated, too specific. This isn't just a thief who knows finance. This is someone with an elite-level understanding of cybersecurity. Someone who could have designed our system architecture." The list of 12 suspects shrank to 3. 3 members of the board with documented, high-level technical backgrounds. A former head of DARPA's cyber division, a tech wunderkind who'd sold his first startup for $1 billion, and Julian Croft, who, before his career in acquisitions, had been a celebrated guest lecturer on network theory at MIT. "It's him," Marcus said, his voice flat with certainty. "It has to be Julian. We need proof, Marcus. Hard, undeniable proof." Evelyn insisted, though her own gut screamed the same name. "He's too powerful to move against on suspicion alone." They fell into a new rhythm, an alliance forged in crisis. The sterile space of Evelyn's penthouse became a shared world. They worked side by side, long into the night, the city lights their only clock. She would order food, and they would eat in silence, staring at screens of cascading code. The professional distance between them evaporated, eroded by shared purpose and exhaustion. One night, staring at the drawing of the sad king, Evelyn asked, "Why did you hide, Marcus? Someone with your talent. You could have run any company in the world. Why become a janitor? Marcus was quiet for a long time. He touched the edge of the drawing. My wife, Sarah, was an investigative journalist. He began, his voice soft. She was like you in a way, relentless. She believed in the truth the way you believe in data. He looked at Evelyn. We were a team. She found the stories and I followed the numbers to prove them. The numbers always tell the truth, if you know how to listen. A flash of memory, sharp and painful. A rainy road, twisted metal. The wail of a siren. He flinched. We were working on something big, he continued, his voice tight. A massive corporate fraud case. The kind that vaporizes pensions and ruins lives. They came after her. Threats. Intimidation. She wouldn't back down. I told her to be careful. His voice broke for a second. She was killed in a car accident. The police said the other driver's brakes failed. A tragic accident. He finally looked at Evelyn, and the depth of the grief in his eyes was a physical blow. I knew it wasn't. I knew they killed her to stop the story, and they would come for me and Maya next to bury it forever. So I buried myself first. I erased Marcus Thorne. I became no one. It was the only way I knew how to keep my promise to her. The only way to protect my daughter. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable. Evelyn's carefully constructed walls, the ones she had built to keep the messy, unpredictable world of human emotion at bay, began to crumble. She saw him not as an asset, but as a man who had sacrificed his entire identity for love. I'm sorry, Marcus, she said, the words feeling achingly inadequate. And then, to her own surprise, she shared a piece of her own guarded past. My first company, I built it with my mentor, my partner. I trusted him completely. We were on the verge of a breakthrough, a predictive analytics engine that would change everything. The night before we were to announce it, he locked me out of the system, filed the patents in his name only, and sold the company out from under me. He told the press I was a junior programmer with delusions of grandeur. She stared out at the city, at the distant lights of other towers, other empires. He taught me a valuable lesson. Never trust people. People are a variable you can't control. Data is absolute. He taught you the wrong lesson, Marcus said quietly. Data can't tell you why. It can show you the path a thief took, but it can't tell you about the greed in his heart. Can't show you courage. It can't show you love. He looked from her to Maya's drawing on the glass. You have to trust something, Evelyn, or you're just as alone in this penthouse as I was in the shadows. His words hit her with the force of a physical impact. She had surrounded herself with glass walls, observing the world but never touching it, believing it was a position of power. She saw now, with painful clarity, that it was a cage. And this man, this quiet, broken man, was the first person in a decade to stand inside it with her. Their alliance was no longer transactional. It was a fragile, unspoken bond of two lonely people fighting a common enemy, finding in each other a reflection of their own hidden scars. The hunt for Julian Croft was no longer just about saving a company. It was about reclaiming a future for them both. The breakthrough came from a place of pure intellectual vanity. Marcus, staring at the fragments of the attacker's code he'd salvaged before the terminal wipe, had an epiphany. He's proud of his work, he murmured, more to himself than to Evelyn. This code, it's too elegant, too unique. It's like an artist's signature. No one writes something this good and only uses it once. The assumption was a leap of faith, but it was all they had. If Julian Croft was their man, and if he was as arrogant as they believed, he might have used a similar coding structure somewhere else, in a context that had nothing to do with Ethelred analytics. It was a digital needle in a global haystack. What are you looking for? Evelyn asked, pulling her chair closer to his workstation. His digital fingerprint, Marcus replied. He began a new kind of search. He wasn't scouring Ethelred's servers anymore. He was casting a wide net across the public web, searching academic databases, open-source coding forums, security conference archives, and the digital graveyards of old data breaches. He wasn't searching for a name or a file. He was searching for a specific sequence of logic, a particular way of nesting commands that was the hallmark of their thief style. For a day and a night he found nothing. The digital world was a cacophony of noise. But Marcus was patient. He filtered, refined, and narrowed his search, teaching his algorithm to look not just for the code, but for the philosophy behind it. And then he got a hit. It was buried deep in the archives of MIT's computer science department. A video file from 11 years prior. The title was Theoretical Network Security and the Unbreakable Cipher. It was a guest lecture. The speaker, younger, his hair darker, but with the same confident smile and easy charm, was Julian Croft. "I've got him," Marcus whispered. Evelyn leaned in, her eyes wide. They watched the video. For an hour, Julian charmed the students, talking about the future of digital security. Then, for the final 10 minutes, he presented a theoretical exercise. He outlined a method for creating a parasitic encryption, a cipher that could hide in plain sight within a host system, undetectable to all but the most specific inquiry. He put a slide up on the screen, filled with lines of code. "This is what a true ghost in the machine would look like," Julian said with a theatrical flourish. Marcus paused the video. He pulled up the fragments of the attacker's code on an adjacent screen. He laid them side by side. It wasn't just similar. It was a 99% match. "Son of a bitch," Evelyn breathed. He was showing it off. They had him. The proof was ironclad, undeniable. The who was confirmed. But a critical question remained. "The why," Evelyn said, her mind already shifting to the next problem. "It doesn't make sense. I ran a deep background check on Julian's finances. He's not just solvent, he's obscenely wealthy. The money he's stolen from Ethelred, it's pocket change to him. A rounding error. Why would a man like that risk everything? His reputation, his freedom, for a few $1,000,000. The motive was the final, missing piece of the puzzle. It gnawed at Marcus. Criminals, in his experience, were rarely irrational. There had to be a logic, a reason that justified the immense risk. He went back to the ledger, the very first piece of evidence he'd uncovered. He stared at the small, insignificant transactions. It wasn't about the amount, he realized. It was about the effect. "He's not trying to get rich, Evelyn," Marcus said slowly, the terrible truth dawning on him. "He's already rich. He's not trying to steal from the company. He's trying to sink it." Evelyn looked at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" "These little thefts," Marcus explained, pointing to the screen. "They're designed to be found. Eventually. Not by me, maybe, but by the quarterly auditors. They create a pattern of instability. They subtly degrade the company's profit margins. They make Ethelred Analytics look less stable, less profitable than it is. They're a weapon aimed at the stock price." The full scope of the plan slammed into Evelyn with the force of a physical blow. Julian wasn't a common thief. He was a saboteur. "He's driving the stock down," she whispered, her face pale. "He's planning a hostile takeover. He's going to use the financial instability he created as leverage with the board, get me ousted, and then he and a group of outside investors will swoop in and buy my own company for pennies on the dollar." The board meeting, now less than 24 hours away, was not just a formality. It was the execution date. Julian planned to use her own data, her own company's finances, poisoned by him, as the weapon to destroy her. They had unmasked the villain, but they had also revealed a plot so audacious, so much larger than they had imagined, that proving it seemed almost impossible. They had proof of the theft, but the takeover plot was still just a theory. Julian would paint Marcus as a disgraced nobody and Evelyn as a paranoid, failing CEO. "He's going to use the boardroom as his stage," Evelyn said, her hands clenched into fists. "Then that's where we'll set our trap," Marcus replied, his eyes hard as flint. "It's time for the ghost to come into the light." The Ethelred Analytics boardroom was a temple of corporate power. A vast slab of polished mahogany sat at its center, surrounded by 20 chairs, each a throne in its own right. The western wall was a single sheet of glass, offering a god's-eye view of the city. Today it was a stage and the final act was about to begin. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, a portrait of unnerving calm. Inside, her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. Marcus was not in the room. He was in a small adjoining tech office, watching via a hidden camera, his fingers poised over a keyboard. This was her battle to fight, for now. The meeting began with mundane formalities, a charade of civility. Then Julian Croft, seated to Evelyn's right, cleared his throat. The performance began. "Members of the board," he started, his voice resonating with grave concern. "It is with a heavy heart that I must address a serious issue. Our company, under Ms. Reed's leadership, has become vulnerable. We have discovered significant financial discrepancies, a pattern of mysterious losses that points to a profound lack of institutional control." He projected a chart onto the main screen. It was a skewed version of the company's finances, expertly manipulated to highlight the missing funds Marcus had discovered. "These are not small errors. This is evidence of a company in disarray. I fear the market will react viciously when this becomes public. Therefore, I have no choice but to call for a vote of no confidence in our CEO, Evelyn Reed." A wave of murmurs and shocked whispers filled the room. This was it, the public execution. Evelyn let the silence hang for a moment, letting the accusation settle. Then she smiled, a thin, cold smile that made Julian's own falter for a fraction of a second. "You're right, Julian," she said, her voice clear and strong. "There has been a theft. A brilliant one, in fact. For months, someone has been bleeding this company, preparing it for a kill strike." She looked around the table, meeting the eyes of every board member. "But you're wrong about one thing. We don't have a lack of control. In fact, we found him." With a tap on her tablet, the image on the main screen changed. Julian's chart vanished, replaced by the ghost ledger Marcus had first uncovered. Then came the VPN logs, the IP address, and finally, a still frame from the MIT lecture showing Julian Croft standing proudly next to his signature code. "The thief is not some anonymous hacker," Evelyn announced, her voice ringing with authority. "He is in this room. Julian Croft, head of strategic acquisitions." The room erupted. Julian, however, went pale for only a moment before his composure returned. He laughed, a short, dismissive bark. "This is absurd. A desperate, paranoid fantasy from a CEO who is clearly out of her depth. You have a collection of circumstantial data. You have no hard proof." "We have the MIT lecture," Evelyn countered. "A theoretical exercise from a decade ago. You can't be serious." He was rallying, his confidence returning. He was a master of this game. He could drown them in doubt and litigation for years. Then Julian smiled, a genuine, triumphant smile. "But you are right about one thing, Evelyn. It is time for a change in leadership." He subtly tapped the face of his expensive watch. Instantly, the main screen went black. All the lights in the boardroom, except for the emergency strips along the floor, went out. The electromagnetic locks on the glass doors clicked shut with a heavy, final thud. "What's going on?" one of the board members yelled. "Security is mine, Evelyn. Not yours," Julian said, his voice now cold and stripped of all its charm. He stood up, a dark silhouette against the gray light of the city. "You were so focused on the pennies I was stealing, you never asked what the real plan was. The hostile takeover? That was just the cover story, in case you got close." His true motive, the final, horrifying twist, was laid bare. "I'm not trying to buy this company. I'm trying to erase it. In 10 minutes, a series of thermite charges will detonate in the server farm 4 floors below us. The entire company, our data, our patents, our client lists will be turned to slag. And I, having shorted Ethelred stock into oblivion this morning, will walk away with a profit that makes my little thefts look like a rounding error. This isn't a takeover. It's corporate murder." As he finished, 2 men in dark suits, armed with sidearms, entered from a private side door. Julian's personal security. The board members gasped, shrinking back in their chairs. It was a perfect trap. But Evelyn had planned for the unthinkable. The security detail she had assigned to Maya was not just for observation. They were a four-man tactical team of ex-special forces, and for the past hour, they had been waiting in the service corridor outside the boardroom. The glass doors to the corridor suddenly shattered inwards. Evelyn's team moved in, swift and silent. Chaos erupted. Julian's men were professionals, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. As the two security teams engaged in a tense, tactical standoff, Julian lunged for a hardline emergency console in the wall, the manual override for the server farm's fire suppression, which he intended to disable. Marcus, watching from the tech room, saw it happen. He wasn't a soldier. He was an accountant. But he was also a father who had been pushed too far. He burst into the boardroom. He didn't run towards the fight. He ran towards a power conduit panel on the far wall, ripping it open. With a desperate prayer, he yanked a handful of wires, creating a massive short. The room was plunged into absolute darkness and chaos as the backup emergency power failed. In the disorienting blackness, Marcus tackled Julian, not with force, but with the dead weight of his body, sending them both sprawling to the floor, away from the console. The tactical team, using night vision, neutralized Julian's guards in seconds. As the emergency lights flickered back on, they found Julian Croft on the floor, pinned under the surprisingly strong grip of the man they all thought was a janitor. Evelyn, her heart pounding, rushed to a secondary hardline terminal, one that was isolated from the main network. Her fingers flew, typing a command code Marcus had given her. It triggered a final, desperate firewall, a complete system lockdown that physically isolated the server farm from any outside command. On a small screen, a message flashed. Wipe protocol canceled. It was over. Julian Croft lay on the floor, defeated. Marcus, breathing heavily, looked up at Evelyn. In his eyes, she saw not a hero, but a father who had just saved his child's future. The king had protected his castle. The aftermath was a controlled storm. Julian Croft and his men were led away in quiet handcuffs, the board members whisked away by security, their faces a mixture of terror and awe. The failed corporate massacre was contained, the story buried under the weight of Ethelred's immense legal and public relations power. The official narrative would be one of a foiled industrial espionage attempt, with Julian Croft as the tragic lone villain. The truth was far too complex and terrifying for public consumption. In the silent, debris-strewn boardroom, only Evelyn and Marcus remained. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind a profound exhaustion and a strange sense of clarity. Evelyn stood before the shattered glass wall, looking down at the city that had almost witnessed her ruin. She had won. She had saved her company. But she knew, with absolute certainty, that she had not done it alone. She turned to Marcus, who was leaning against the great mahogany table, a dark bruise forming on his cheek where he'd hit the floor. "The board is convening an emergency session tomorrow," she said, her voice soft. "They will formalize Julian's removal. They will also be voting on the creation of a new division." She walked towards him. "The Division of Corporate Integrity and Risk Assessment. It will operate outside the normal chain of command, with full autonomy and oversight over every department. It will answer to one person, and one person only, me." She stopped in front of him. "I need someone to run it, someone who sees what others don't, someone who trusts the truth more than the rules." Marcus looked away towards the door. The fight was over. The instinct to retreat, to run back to the safety of his anonymous life, was overwhelming. "Evelyn, I don't belong in this world. You belong wherever you choose to be," she countered, her voice firm. "You spent 5 years hiding in the shadows, Marcus. But the man who faced down Julian Croft, the man who was willing to sacrifice everything to protect this company, to protect me, that man is not a ghost. He's a leader." She reached out, not to touch him, but to gently tap the crayon drawing of the Lion King, which had somehow survived the chaos, still taped to a shard of remaining glass. "Your daughter doesn't need a ghost for a father. She needs a hero. She needs the man she already thinks you are." He looked at the drawing, at the smiling, brave lion. He thought of Maya's unwavering faith in him. He had fought this battle to keep her safe in the world he had built. But perhaps true safety wasn't in hiding. Perhaps it was in building a world where they no longer had to hide. Evelyn's expression softened, the last remnants of the Ice Queen melting away. "And for what it's worth," she added, her voice barely a whisper, "I think I need him too." It was an admission, a confession, a fragile bridge built across the chasm of their two worlds. It was more than a job offer. It was an offer of a life. Marcus looked at her, at this brilliant, powerful woman who had seen past his uniform to the man he had buried. He saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the echo of his own loneliness. He had started this journey to get medicine for his daughter, a simple act of a father's love. It had led him here to a choice not just about his future, but about who he was meant to be. He slowly nodded. "Okay, Evelyn," he said, a small, weary smile touching his lips. "I'll take the job." He was reclaiming his name. He was reclaiming his life, not just for himself and not just for Maya, but for the new, unexpected alliance that had become something far more precious. 6 months later, the crisp autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and decaying leaves. The afternoon sun, low and golden, cast long shadows across the playground of Northwood Elementary. The final bell rang, and a flood of children burst from the school doors, their shouts and laughter filling the air. Marcus Thorne stood waiting by the gate. He was not in a rumpled janitor's uniform, but in a well-tailored charcoal suit, the jacket unbuttoned, the tie loosened. The weariness that had been etched into his features was gone, replaced by a quiet, easy confidence. He looked like he belonged. "Daddy!" A small figure with a bright pink backpack broke from the crowd and launched herself into his arms. Maya squeezed him tight, her face beaming. "Daddy, look what I made." She held up a piece of paper. It was a drawing, rendered in her signature, enthusiastic crayon. It showed 3 figures holding hands under a big, smiling yellow sun. On one side was a tall man with a crown, Marcus. In the middle was a little girl with a bright pink backpack, Maya. And on the other side was a woman with dark hair and a brilliant smile. Underneath, Maya had carefully written their names. Daddy, Maya, Evelyn. Marcus's heart swelled. He kissed the top of her head. "It's beautiful, sweetie. The best one yet." A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The back door opened, and Evelyn Reed stepped out. She was not the severe CEO of boardrooms and glass towers. She wore a soft, cream-colored cashmere sweater and jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. The smile on her face was genuine and warm, reaching all the way to her eyes. It was a smile Marcus had come to know very well. She walked over, her gaze locking with his in a moment of shared, silent understanding. She leaned down and kissed Maya on the cheek. "I saw the test scores. Top of your class in math, just like your dad." "Evelyn," Maya giggled, throwing her arms around Evelyn's neck. The 3 of them walked away from the school, towards the park across the street. They didn't look like a CEO, her chief of integrity, and his daughter. They looked like a family. As Maya ran ahead to chase a swirl of falling leaves, Evelyn's hand found Marcus's. Their fingers intertwined, a simple, natural gesture that spoke of countless shared moments over the past 6 months. "Julian Croft took the plea deal," she said quietly. 25 years. He'll never see the outside of a prison again." "Good," Marcus said. The name was just a ghost now, a figure from a past that felt a lifetime away. They watched Maya, her laughter carrying on the breeze. His new role at Ethelred was challenging, fulfilling. He was building something, not just finding what was broken. He was protecting the company and thousands of jobs from the inside out. He was good at it. He was home. But this right here was the true measure of his new life. This peace, this light, this love. He had found his purpose again, not in the shadows he had hidden in, but in the warmth of the 2 people who had given him a reason to be brave. He had spent years building walls to keep the world out, only to discover that the strongest fortress is the one you build with others. What walls have you built in your own life? and who might hold the key to helping you tear them down? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire.